I couldn't sleep that night. It wasn't just the emptiness in our bed, though that was part of it. It was her browser history, wiped clean before she turned in. It was the time stamp that said she'd been online until 2 in the morning. And it was the silence of the house. Too many secrets in the walls, too much distance in the dark. I lay there, in that stillness, listening to my own breathing, feeling my heart beat like it was counting off the seconds until something snapped, something inside me that had been wound tight for weeks. I want you to know, I'm speaking as if you're listening on the other side of this camera, or maybe I'm just talking to myself in an empty room, that from the outside, everything looked normal. Maybe it even felt normal before I started connecting the dots. But that quiet, that hush in the house, it was the prelude to a violent storm. Just no thunder. Not yet. She came home much later than usual. You said you were tired, remember? Told me you needed to go to bed early. Said something about an exhausting day, errands that dragged on, and the baby draining your energy. I believed it, or half believed it. I wanted to believe it because the alternative was, what? That the woman I loved, still love, in a way, was out somewhere with another man, carrying my child but laughing in his arms. But you smelled of a cologne I didn't own. I didn't catch it until after you slipped out of your clothes and vanished into the shower. But it was there, lingering on your shoes. My dog, Max, growled at you like you were a stranger. You rushed to bed, flicked off the light, leaving me in the dim glow of the hallway. You'd never been that quick to shut me out. I lay awake, long after your breathing softened into a steady rhythm, opened my phone, tapped into that corner of the browser's world where we usually keep our casual searches. Pictures, social media. Yours was empty, cleaned out. For a moment, I told myself maybe you just cleared some cookies, some random old data. But at 2 in the morning, right before you came to bed, my heart was pumping so hard it made me dizzy, but I stayed still, watching the shadows of the ceiling fan cross the walls. Let me tell you, I was no saint in that moment. Ugly thoughts rose up in my head. I pictured smashing that phone to pieces. I pictured flipping on the bedroom light and demanding the truth. But I didn't, because I knew if I woke you up, you'd lie straight to my face, and that would be worse than not knowing. Maybe I was afraid to know. So I let you sleep, and I stayed there, staring at the darkness, building up a quiet rage. It wasn't the kind of anger that makes you lash out. It was the kind that simmers until it eats you alive from the inside. The next morning, you avoided my eyes. You showered quickly, dried your hair without a word. Then you said you were meeting a client about a new interior design project. That was your official reason for heading out the door in your pressed blouse and pencil skirt. Dressed for success, or maybe for something else. My fingers clenched around the edge of the kitchen counter, nails biting into the wood. I forced myself to let go, forced a smile that felt like a dead thing on my face. You turned, glanced at me, and there was that flicker of guilt or fear in your eyes. Then you were gone. Max barked once, uncertain, as if he too felt something shift in the air. I patted his head. Good boy, I said. He didn't calm down until your car pulled away. I had an errand of my own that morning, one I never imagined I'd have to run. A pregnancy test. You told me you were pregnant, after all, though in truth I thought we'd been careful with timing. But you insisted. You were late, you said. I remember hugging you in excitement when you first told me. I recall your face in that moment, a smile that didn't quite reach your eyes. Had there been the slightest hesitation in your voice, I picked up the test at a pharmacy on the other side of town, under the pretense of stocking up on vitamins for you, so you wouldn't suspect a thing. The clerk didn't even look twice, just another worried father-to-be, right? By the time I got home, the day had turned cold and windy, the kind of weather you get in Denver when a front blows in over the mountains. I let the wind cut across my cheeks, let it sting, because at least I could feel something that made sense. For a moment, I stood in the driveway, looking at the empty spot beside my car, wondering where you really were. I think that's when I started talking out loud to no one, Maybe it was the dog. Maybe it was an echo of you. The words came out of me like they'd built up in my gut for too long. You're lying to me, I said to the empty air. I know it, and you know it. Then I forced myself to breathe, go inside, and wait. Hours later, you returned, carrying grocery bags and a bundle of swatches for a design pitch. You talked fast about how this client was so excited for pastel colors, how it was going to be fresh, modern, inspirational. You said you'd pick out the baby's nursery color while you were at it. I watched you set the groceries on the counter. Fresh vegetables, a carton of almond milk, some artisan bread. Everything was normal, domestic. Yet that faint perfume still clung to your jacket, a lingering presence, telling me there was another side to your day you weren't willing to share. I didn't confront you then. I couldn't. My chest felt full of splinters. Instead, I nodded and pretended to listen. I even asked about the bread, forced a half-hearted laugh about how we could try a new sandwich recipe. And all the while, I clutched the test in my pocket. When you finally headed upstairs to change, I followed at a distance. My footsteps felt heavier than usual, like I was carrying a secret that weighed 1,000 pounds. I stopped in the doorway of the bedroom, cleared my throat, and said in a quiet voice, "Hey, can we talk for a second?" You paused, hand still on the button of your blouse, turning to face me with those wide, questioning eyes. "Of course," you said. I pulled out the test, held it up. "I got this. Just so, you know, for peace of mind. I thought maybe we should confirm." The color drained from your face. "You don't trust me?" you asked, voice a fraction too high, a fraction too fast. Guilt, fear, something. I saw the flicker in your eyes, that little quake of panic. You tried to hide it by turning away, rummaging through the bedside drawer, as though you had some unstoppable chore to perform right then. "It's not that," I lied. I'm so worried about you, about us. I want to make sure everything is fine, that there's no confusion." You swallowed, nodded. "Fine," you whispered. We tested that night. Quiet. Clinical. The lines told the truth. You were pregnant. Part of me wanted to collapse to my knees in relief, to cradle you, to bury my face in your hair. But the doubt had already taken root. I couldn't dig it out with just those 2 lines of pink. My mind boiled with the possibility. The baby might not be mine. Could it be that other man's? The man who left his scent on your shoes. The man you'd been meeting when you said you were with clients. Suddenly, I heard the soft pad of Max's paws as he peeked into the bathroom. He stared at us, at me, at you, and I saw in that dog's eyes the same confusion I felt in my gut. The test confirmed you were carrying a child, but everything else was still a twisted knot of lies. I forced a thin, shaky smile. "So you're pregnant," I said, a statement instead of a celebration. You just nodded, not meeting my gaze. That was the moment something in me died. Or maybe it was reborn as something colder, sharper. I walked out, left you alone in the bathroom. I heard the click of the lock behind me. As I headed downstairs, I realized. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I was just numb. And there was a terrifying power in that numbness, like the eye of a hurricane gathering inside. The next morning, you told me you'd be heading to a friend's party that evening. Just a quick get-together, you said, a casual celebration for a recent design success. "It's not really your scene," you added, a little too quickly. "Besides, you've got an early day tomorrow at the rehab center, right?" That friend, was it him? I caught the faint tremor in your voice, the flick of your gaze to the floor, but I played along, let you believe I was clueless. I wanted you to slip up. I wanted to see the cracks widen. So I just nodded, said, "Sure," and tried to keep my voice steady. That quiet tension in my chest spread like frost across my lungs. I kept my mouth shut because I needed to see how far you'd go. When you left for the party, dressed in a sleek black outfit that hugged your figure, I noticed how you angled your body away from me, as though you were already hiding. I noticed the spike heels. You said your feet were too sore for them these days. Pregnancy made them swell. Yet you wore them anyway. Then you were gone. The dog sat near the door, whining softly, pawing at the floor. And I stood there, listening to the echoes of your car fade into the distance. 2 hours later, I followed. Don't ask how I found out where the party was. Let's just say event planners in Denver have their networks, and ironically, one of my old acquaintances from the social work side is also on the security side for upscale venues. I made a few calls. I told him I was concerned about my wife's safety. He gave me a name, an address. That was enough. I drove in silence, both hands tight on the wheel. The city lights blurred across my windshield, a smear of color that felt distant and unreal. All I could think about was you, my pregnant wife, possibly carrying a child that wasn't mine. I stared at the traffic signals glowing green and red, feeling that swirl of color pounding in my head. When I reached the venue, a tall building with tinted windows and pounding music, it was well after midnight. I parked down a side street. My heartbeat hammered so loud I could taste the metallic tang of fear in my mouth. Was I really going to do this? Confront you in public, blow up our life? But it wasn't exactly a confrontation. I told myself I just needed proof. Suspicion is a snake in the dark, but with proof at least I'd see the thing plainly. So I took the elevator up to the 8th floor, stepping into a corridor that reeked of cologne, perfume, liquor. I heard the throbbing bass of music from somewhere beyond, and I could see shifting lights down the hallway. Each step felt heavier than the last. Then I saw you. You were at the far end of a private lounge, leaning against a broad-shouldered man in an expensive suit. He had one arm around your waist, the other pressed to the small of your back, guiding you as you both swayed to the beat. His hair was styled close on the sides, longer on top, and he wore a flashy wristwatch that caught the overhead lights. I recognized him from an old local magazine profile, a successful event planner, Jason something. He was leaning in close, his cheek brushing yours. You were smiling, eyes half closed, your hand drifting up to rest on his shoulder. There was an intimacy between you two, electric, undeniable. That was the moment the earth tilted under my feet. It felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at everything I believed about us crumbling away. I saw your lips part as he whispered something. His hand trailed along your side, dangerously close to territory that should have been sacred. You tilted your head back, exposing your neck, your hair brushing his collar. The gesture was so sensual my stomach clenched. You were pregnant, carrying a child I once thought was mine, and yet here you were, pressed against another man in a dark lounge filled with sweet liquor and throbbing lights. I wanted to rush forward, to yank you away from him, to punch him in the face, to do something. But I froze. My mind reeled, going blank, except for a slow, poisonous whisper that said, "This is really happening. This is not a nightmare. This is your reality." When you leaned in, your face only inches from his, I saw the desire in your eyes. I saw how your hands rested on his shoulders, how your fingertips curled into his expensive jacket. Then it happened. He kissed your neck. A soft, lingering kiss that made your body shudder. And you let him. In that moment, I stopped existing for you. I was just a ghost in the doorway, watching the woman I'd married melt into the arms of another man. The betrayal wasn't simply physical. It was the look on your face, the unguarded hunger you revealed for him. You pulled him closer, whispered something in his ear, and he nodded, letting his hand trail across your lower back. He slid it down, cupping the curve of your backside, pressing you into him. My vision tunneled. The rest of the room dropped away, and all I saw was your betrayal. The erotic tension around you was thick, your bodies practically fused in that brief moment. The music's pulsing beat matched the pounding of my own blood. I felt physically ill, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. I must have made some sound. Maybe my breath hitched, or my shoes scraped the floor, because at that point, you turned slightly, as though sensing another presence. The light fell across my face, and your gaze locked on mine. I saw your eyes go wide, your hand jerk away from his shoulder. But it was too late. I'd already seen enough. More than enough. I backed up a step, my voice caught in my throat. Jason turned to see what made you startle, and our eyes met. For a second, I thought he might come toward me, maybe say something snide, or try to assert dominance. But he stayed put, his arms still around you. I saw a flicker of something pass across his features. Maybe guilt, maybe fear, but mostly arrogance, as if he'd been in this situation before, as if he knew he had the upper hand. I spun on my heel and rushed back down the corridor, not waiting for you to follow. The pounding in my ears drowned out any calls you might have made after me. Once I reached the elevator, I stabbed at the button, trying to keep my hand from shaking. The doors slid open, and I got in alone. There was a mirrored wall inside, and I caught a glimpse of myself. Eyes burning, face pale, sweat beading on my forehead. I looked like a man who'd just taken a bullet to the chest. In a way, I had. The drive home was a blur of headlights and rage. I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. My mind flickered between images, you smiling at him, his lips on your neck, the way your pregnant belly, small but noticeable, moved in close to his torso. Was I that blind? Or did I simply refuse to see? Max greeted me at the door with a soft whine. I let out a ragged breath and sank down onto the living room couch, burying my face in my hands. I stayed there until I heard your car pull up, maybe an hour later. I half expected you to rush in, tears streaming, apologizing. Instead, you crept in quietly, as though you hoped I'd already be asleep, as if you were a guilty teenager sneaking in past curfew. A sick, bitter laugh tore from my throat. We didn't talk that night. You disappeared into the bedroom, and I stayed on that couch, eyes wide open in the darkness. At one point, I thought I heard you sobbing, but I didn't go to comfort you. My body felt glued to the cushions. All I could do was stare at the ceiling, feeling numb. But numbness can't last forever. By morning, it had hardened into something else. Resolve, maybe, or a thirst for confirmation. I needed physical proof, something I could hold in front of your face if you tried to deny it again. To you, that might sound cruel. But after seeing you in another man's arms, I realized I wasn't dealing with the woman I married. That woman, or the idea I had of her, was gone. You showered while I pretended to brew coffee. I listened to the water run, my mind already racing with thoughts. I needed to see if the baby was actually mine. One conversation with a test wasn't enough. There was a bigger question of paternity. But how to approach it? If I demanded a DNA test, you'd know the game was up. Maybe you'd try to vanish, run to him, or worse, talk your way out of it with more lies. So I kept quiet, measured coffee grounds into the filter, listened to you humming softly from behind the bathroom door. I tried to recall the last time you'd hummed in my presence and realized it had been months. Maybe you felt victorious, thinking you'd fooled me. The thought scorched my insides. When you finally emerged, wrapped in a robe, your hair damp around your shoulders, you paused in the kitchen. "Morning," you said, your voice subdued. "Did you sleep okay?" The forced concern in your tone made me want to choke. I gave a slow nod, not trusting myself to speak. I poured coffee into a mug, pushed it across the counter toward you, then turned away to hide the bitterness on my face. I was awake, I finally said, thinking. A slight tremor passed over your features, but you caught it. You sipped your coffee. "About what?" "You," I answered plainly. "Me. Our future." You stared into the cup, the silence almost unbearable. I could sense you had a dozen excuses ready, 100 rationalizations, but you kept them behind clenched teeth. "Are we okay?" you asked softly. I forced a brief, empty laugh. "You tell me." You didn't answer. The tension thickened, pressing against my ears until I thought I might burst. But I held my composure, just like I do at the rehab center when a patient is in the middle of a breakdown, and I need to keep them calm. It's a skill. Quiet, unnerving calm. By the third day after the party, you were walking on eggshells around me. I was waiting for some confession, some meltdown, but it never came. Instead, I found your phone one afternoon on the kitchen table, unlocked. A small mercy of your carelessness. I peeked inside. I was beyond guilt at that point. I had to know. Sure enough, there were messages from Jay, lines of text about how much he missed your laugh, how he loved the smell of your hair, how he couldn't wait to see you again. You told him you'd handle things at home, that I was safe, and that he was your escape. Escape. The word felt like a slap in the face. I read the thread, taking photos of the screen with my own phone. Then I found pictures, hidden in a private album. A selfie of you and him in some living room or hotel suite. You in a dress I'd never seen. The timestamp was from last week, right around the time you said you were seeing a design client. I closed out, set the phone back exactly as I found it, and walked away. The knowledge burned inside me. I paced the kitchen, reading the messages on my phone's camera roll, letting them sink in until there was no turning back. At some point, I realized tears were sliding down my face. That sense of false guilt gnawed at me, like maybe I hadn't been enough for you. Maybe I'd failed to give you the excitement or attention you needed. But underneath that guilt lay a molten fury, the sense that you'd taken my trust, my love, and spat on it. I told you I was going to the grocery store, but I only got as far as the back porch. I stood there, staring out at the yard, the thin patch of grass where Max liked to run. Leaves swirled in the autumn breeze, a swirl of colors that might have been beautiful any other day. I felt a weight in my chest, a silent scream. My wife is pregnant, having an affair, and I'm here worrying about whether I did enough as a husband. That's when everything clicked. I realized no matter what I did or didn't do, you'd made your choice. You wanted the thrill, the newness, the tension. You wanted him. That's not on me. Not entirely. I wish I could say I confronted you with righteous anger, told you to get out, demanded a divorce right then. But that's not how it played out. Instead, I swallowed the pain, filed away the screenshots, and bided my time. I wanted to see how far you push this. Part of me even wanted to see if you'd break down and confess. Maybe if you did, I'd salvage something, at least the dignity of hearing it from you. But you never did. A week passed. You grew bolder. Late nights, consulting with clients, a business trip out of town for the final design meeting. Of course, I knew Jason was behind it. My phone calls to you went unanswered, or you returned them with short, dismissive texts. The dog became restless each time you stepped in. He'd sniff at your ankles and growl. You laughed it off as him being weird, but I think he sensed you were becoming a stranger in our home. Then it happened. I found a positive paternity test in your purse. You'd obviously done some advanced screening. Hush-hush, probably at Jason's urging. Or maybe you wanted to confirm if the baby was his or mine. The documents were only partially complete, but the name Rodriguez was on one of the forms, next to a date. No official signature or final result, just partial data. My stomach lurched. You were making sure which man fathered the child, and you never said a word to me. I confronted you that same evening, not angrily, but with a quiet intensity that unsettled even me. I remember you standing in the hallway, your eyes darting to the front door as though you might escape. I held the test results in my hand, that single sheet of paper. You want to explain this? I asked, voice shaking with suppressed fury. You froze, your face going white, your lips trembling. Then you gave me a pitiful half-truth about wanting to check your health, about the lab using Jason's name for insurance reasons. I stood there, letting you pour out your flimsy excuses, feeling a hollow sort of calm. All I could think was, you're lying again. It's what you do. Finally, you ran out of words. We stared at each other. My breathing was steady, but my chest felt ready to explode. Then you broke. your voice cracking. Michael, please. Stop, I said. I tore the paper in two. Then in four. I let the pieces flutter to the floor. You watched them like they were bits of your own skin. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. I just want you to know, I said slowly, I see you. I know what you've done. And I'm done chasing your lies. You swallowed, tears sliding down your cheeks. But you said nothing. Nothing. That night, you told me you were going to bed early. I nodded, ignoring the irony. You retreated upstairs, leaving me alone in the living room. I stayed up, pacing, my mind spinning, running through every scenario. Should I turn the house upside down, gather your stuff, toss it out on the lawn? Should I call your parents, let them know what their daughter's been up to? Should I track Jason down, break his nose? The old me, the me who was loyal and trusting, was shredded. In its place stood a man who wanted retribution, but also a man terrified of the monster he could become. Eventually, I decided. I needed to end this with clarity, with finality. I decided I wasn't going to do it with violence or screaming. You'd been living in illusions, so I was going to bring you the truth as cold and sharp as a knife. Morning came, and I found your shoes by the front door. The same pair that once carried that foreign cologne. I picked them up, examined them. Max was at my side, whining. I set them down, then walked into the kitchen and calmly washed the floor. The water felt cold beneath my feet. The tiles made my toes go numb. A small detail, but it stuck in my mind. That chill, creeping up my legs, telling me there was no warmth left between us. You came downstairs, asked me why I was washing the floor so early. I shrugged, said nothing, kept working. You lingered, uncertain, then drifted to the dining table. I could feel your eyes on my back, probably trying to gauge my mood. But I gave you no clues. Eventually, you slung your purse over your shoulder and said you'd run some errands. You paused in the doorway, waiting for me to speak, but I never did. Finally, you left. That was the last morning we spent under the same roof. I drove out to a small clinic across town, a place I knew would handle discreet paternity tests. I gave them what they needed. Your hair from a hairbrush, which they said might or might not be sufficient, but it was a start. I told them I was sure you were pregnant. They asked if I had anything from you that might contain your DNA. I gave them a swab of a lipstick you'd used. They told me to come back in a few days. I didn't mention your lover, didn't mention your name, just left the forms half complete. I realized that, deep down, I was still clinging to hope that the child might be mine, that maybe something could be salvaged. But in truth, I think I knew. I think a part of me had accepted the baby was not mine, and my final act was only to confirm it, to solidify the break. A day passed, then another. I was in a quiet daze, going through the motions at work, faking normalcy with a friendly smile for my colleagues and the people I counseled. But a few of them saw the cracks. One client even asked if I was feeling well. I told him it was just stress. The next time I saw you, I found you rummaging in the closet in our bedroom, pulling out a small suitcase. You said you needed some space to clear your head. I just stood there, watching you with a calm I'd never felt before. It was as if all the heartbreak had burned itself out, leaving ashes. You looked at me for a reaction, but I gave you none. You started to open your mouth, to say something, but I lifted a hand, silencing you. You do what you have to do, I said. My voice was level. I think that rattled you more than any shouting could. You packed a few clothes, some toiletries. The tension was so thick I could barely breathe. Then you tried to hug me, as if that could erase everything. I gently pushed you away, stepping back. You let out a shaky breath, took your suitcase, and walked out. I stayed there, in that half-empty bedroom, listening to the front door close. For a moment, I thought I might collapse. But I stayed upright. That afternoon, I went to pick up the test results. I barely glanced at them. There it was, a high probability the child was not mine. No final confirmation, but enough to kill the last flicker of false hope in my chest. I folded the papers, placed them in my jacket pocket, and drove home. My head was pounding, my throat dry. I felt like a condemned man, except the sentence was already carried out. I found your note on the kitchen table. Some half-hearted apology about how you needed time, that you weren't sure about us, that you were sorry for the pain you'd caused, but you had to follow your heart. I stared at those words. Follow your heart. Like that justifies everything, right? I set the note aside, pulled out a pen and a scrap of paper. I wrote 9 words. I'm not taking revenge. I'm healing from you. Then I signed it, pinned it to the fridge with a magnet, and took off my shoes. Why the shoes? Maybe it was symbolic. Maybe I wanted to feel the pain of the cold floor under my bare feet. Pain that at least made sense. I grabbed my keys, left the house, locked it behind me, and walked out onto the street, the pavement cool and rough under my soles. Each step was a jolt of reality, a physical reminder that I was alive, that I could still feel something, even if it was discomfort. I didn't know where I was going at first. I just let my feet carry me. A mile, 2 miles. The sidewalk was unkind, biting into my arches, but the sensation helped me focus. Cars rolled by, drivers staring at me in confusion. It must have been a strange sight. A grown man walking barefoot along city blocks, dressed in slacks and a coat. But I didn't care. It was my moment, my break from the illusions of comfort. My vow to feel every sting of gravel, every shard of broken glass if I had to. So I'd never forget the sting of betrayal. Eventually, I ended up outside a small diner. I stood there for a moment, catching my breath, leaning against a lamppost. My feet throbbed. I looked at my reflection in the diner's window. I saw a man who had been gutted, yet somehow was still standing. I stepped in, ignoring the startled glance of the hostess who took in my bare feet. I took a seat at the counter, ordered a coffee. I had no appetite, but the smell of frying bacon and fresh toast felt oddly comforting. The coffee came, steaming hot. I held the mug in both hands, letting the warmth seep into my cold fingers. I kept thinking of you, where you were if you had gone to Jason, if you were lying in his arms, whispering to him that the baby was his. I swallowed. Maybe you would always be haunted by what you did to us. Maybe not. But me? I had no illusions left. I left the diner after an hour or so, still barefoot, ignoring the concerned questions from the waitress. I just gave her a reassuring nod, left some cash, and stepped back out onto the sidewalk. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't look. It might have been you. It might have been my colleague or my brother. It didn't matter. I walked until my feet were screaming, until I couldn't take another step. Then I called a cab. In the cab's back seat, I stared at the city passing by. I remember the driver giving me odd looks, but he didn't ask questions. He dropped me off a few blocks from home. I paid him and limped toward the house, bracing myself for emptiness. When I walked inside, Max ran up, tail wagging, then froze, sniffing my battered feet, whining softly. I gave his ears a scratch, letting out a long, ragged breath. For a moment, I stood in the entryway, scanning the living room, the furniture we picked out together, the photos on the wall that showed me hugging you, both of us smiling. I stared at those framed moments, feeling a knife twist in my gut. Then I walked over, removed a few of them from the frames, and slipped the photos into a drawer. I didn't want to destroy them, but I couldn't bear to look at them anymore. The next day, I started moving my things to a friend's place. The house was in my name, but I didn't want to be there. It felt contaminated by your lies. So I stripped my personal belongings, clothes, books, the old guitar I barely played. I took Max with me too. He jumped into the passenger seat of my car, tail between his legs, as though he sensed the confusion. It wasn't a dramatic exit. I didn't curse your name, didn't smash the walls or throw your clothes on the lawn. I just slipped away, leaving behind your suitcase, your designs, your illusions. You texted me a few times, then called. I let it ring. Eventually, I picked up, let you speak. You asked if we could meet, talk things through. You sounded frantic, maybe because you realized how final my exit was. I told you there was nothing left to say. My voice was calm, flat. I heard you crying, but I felt no urge to comfort you. I was already healing, in my own jagged way. Time passed. Days, weeks. The rumors spread among our mutual acquaintances. You were with Jason, though it didn't last long. Something about how he wasn't ready to settle down, even if you were carrying his child. I heard you were living alone in some apartment on the other side of town, calling your sister for support. Maybe you realized there were no easy fixes. Maybe you learned that a lover who indulges the thrill of a secret affair isn't always the man who wants to be a father. Me, I found a kind of peace. Not happiness, nothing so simple, but a quiet acceptance. I told people, I'm not taking revenge. I'm healing. Some looked at me like I was naive, maybe weak. But I knew the truth. Revenge wouldn't give me back what you took, and it sure wouldn't mend the fracture in my soul. I still see you around, in random places, or I hear about you from friends. They say you don't go to parties anymore, that you're more withdrawn, as if the nightlife lost its shine once everything blew up in your face. Sometimes, they mention your name. They say you're pregnant and alone, that you're restless and haunted by guilt. Some tell me you speak about me late at night, that you wake from nightmares calling my name. Maybe that's rumor. Maybe it's true. I don't take pleasure in it. I don't need your suffering. I've got my own healing to focus on. But there's a scene I can't shake. A party lounge, colored lights swirling. You pressed close to another man, your eyes half-lidded with desire, your arms around his neck. I wish that memory didn't burn so hot, but it does. Sometimes I lie awake, those images flickering like a broken reel in my head. I still hear the music, feel that thunder in my ears. Sometimes I imagine going back in time, shaking myself by the shoulders, telling myself not to let you slip away. But illusions don't serve me anymore. I talk to a camera now, or maybe a journal, just to get the words out. That's what you're hearing. Maybe you'll watch it someday or read it. Maybe you'll grasp the depth of what you did to us. Maybe not. I can't control that. But I can control my own steps forward. I can control the moment I put on my shoes again and walked away, barefoot or not, letting the pain remind me that I'm alive and free. Time's a strange thing. It doesn't really heal wounds. It just teaches you to live with the scars. I still feel echoes of you in small details. The pillow that once held your scent, the color samples you left behind, the half-finished coffee mug on the table when you stormed out. Sometimes I pause and wonder, did we ever really stand a chance? Or was this always how it would end? In the end, it doesn't matter. I've changed. I'm not the same trusting guy who believed love could conquer anything if we just tried hard enough. I've learned a brutal truth. Some betrayals can't be undone. And some part of me needed to break so that I could become stronger in ways I never expected. I think about the child you're carrying. Whether it's his or mine, it's innocent of our mistakes. If it's mine, some far chance, then we'll have a different reckoning one day. But if it's his, or if he vanishes, that's your path to walk. I can't hold your hand anymore. Can't shield you from the consequences of your lies. I'm not telling you this out of spite. I'm telling you because I want you to know I don't hate you, even after everything. Hate would mean I still dwell on you, still revolve around your gravity. But I'm free now. Free to feel the cold floor beneath my feet, free to let my heart ache and mend in its own time. Free to accept that I can live without you. Free to recognize that your betrayal doesn't define my worth. That's the story, I guess, or at least as much as I can bear to say right now. It's not neat and tidy. There's no grand scene of me riding off into the sunset or throwing a triumphant party. There's just me, peeling off the bandages, letting the wound breathe, healing, slowly, painfully, but surely. So if you're still listening or watching, or if you ever stumble onto this recording, this is how it ends. I walked out barefoot because I wanted to remember how it felt. The sting, the cold, the vulnerability of that moment. The quiet that came after. The sense of final release when I realized I don't owe you vengeance. I don't owe you screams or slammed doors. I owe myself the chance to heal. And that's what I'm doing. One bare footstep at a time.